The request came late on a Monday afternoon, the kind of day that clung to the air like fatigue. Dr. Lena Hart had just slipped off her shoes and was halfway through a lukewarm coffee when the hospital coordinator knocked softly on her office door. "There's someone asking for the best physical therapist in the city," Rachel said, her voice caught between amusement and curiosity. He was very specific. Lena raised a brow, tilting her chair back. "And you told him what exactly?" "I told him she's overbooked, overtired, and probably overdue for a vacation." Rachel grinned, but he insisted, said he'd wait, didn't give a name at first. "Then when he did, I figured you'd want to hear it from me." Lena set the mug down, her fingers tightening just a little. "Who?" she asked. Rachel's smile faltered. "Mason Langley." For a moment the room didn't breathe. The name folded into the air like a long-lost song, one Lena hadn't expected to hear again, at least not here, not now. Not when she'd finally gotten used to the ache settling into a quiet place in her life. "He's in the waiting room," Rachel added gently. "Should I tell him you're not available?" Lena stood slowly, her pulse beginning to drum somewhere in her chest. "No, I'll see him." The hallway felt longer than usual, the fluorescents humming too loudly. She saw him before he saw her, sitting on the edge of a worn chair, one leg extended awkwardly in front of him, ankle wrapped, shoulders slouched. He was dressed in a tailored coat that had clearly seen better days, beard grown in just enough to mark time. His face was still unmistakable. That crooked smile had once wrecked her entire summer. And his eyes, the same storm gray she remembered, scanned the waiting room with growing impatience until they landed on her. "Lena," he said, standing too quickly and flinching at the movement. She didn't rush to meet him, but she didn't turn away either. "Mason," she said, her voice steady despite the heat in her cheeks, "you're injured." "Got in a motorcycle accident. Hairline fracture in the ankle, torn ligaments in the shoulder. They said I'd need physical therapy. I asked for the best." "And they sent you to me," she said flatly. "They said your name before I did, but once they did," he gave a small shrug, "I figured it was meant to be." Lena folded her arms. "You left me a decade ago without a word." "I know," he said, eyes not flinching from hers, "and I regret it more than you'll ever understand, but I need your help." "You could have gone anywhere. I wanted to come to you." The silence thickened between them. She felt Rachel's eyes from down the hall, felt the weight of old wounds pressing against the thin walls of her composure. "I'll take your case," she said finally, "strictly professional." Mason's jaw tensed, but he nodded, understood. He followed her to the therapy room with the stiff gait of someone used to moving easily through the world. Watching him wince slightly with each step stirred something unbidden in her, but she swallowed it. The space was brightly lit, filled with careful serenity. She motioned for him to sit. "I need full imaging reports, and I'll want to assess range of motion before we start treatment. We'll move slow. The fracture needs more time to heal before we weight bear, but I'll work on the shoulder right away." Mason nodded, his gaze flicking around the room as if trying to map who she had become in the years since he left. She didn't offer conversation. She ran through her intake questions with clinical clarity, noting his responses, his expressions. His voice had deepened. His shoulders were broader. His smile was quieter now, edged with something like regret. When her hands met his shoulder to assess inflammation, he stiffened for a moment, then exhaled. "You still smell like lavender," he said. "Don't," she warned softly, not meeting his eyes. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I couldn't stay away." She moved his arm gently, testing rotation. "You were gone a long time. I didn't know how to come back. You should have figured it out before now." Mason closed his eyes briefly. "I know." Lena swallowed hard. Her hands were sure and professional, but her heart was not. It still remembered every word he never said, every promise left hanging like unfinished verses. She finished the assessment, noted the limitations in his movement, and printed out an at-home routine. "You'll come in 3 times a week," she said. "Morning or late afternoon, your choice." "Afternoons," he said, "easier for work." "What do you do now?" she asked before she could stop herself. "Open a community garage, teach kids how to fix up old engines. I wanted to do something that felt like building again." Lena paused at the door. That had not been the life he'd imagined at 25 when he was going to race the circuits and take the world with him. Something had changed him. Life maybe, or guilt. "Okay," she said softly, "we'll start tomorrow." As he left, he turned at the door. "You haven't changed, Lena." You don't know that, she replied, not unkindly. I'd like to. When he was gone, she sat back down, hands resting on her knees, breath uneven. There was a storm moving in behind her ribs. He asked for the best, and somehow he found her again. Mason showed up the next day 5 minutes early, the afternoon sun slanting through the tall clinic windows, casting golden light across the laminate floors. He stood awkwardly near the entrance, one hand gripping the strap of his sling like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to look comfortable here. Lena noticed how quiet he had become. The Mason she remembered used to move through rooms like gravity bent toward him, confident, always speaking first, always with a plan. Now he seemed to hold something close, like if he let go of it, it would disappear. She didn't greet him with a smile, just a nod, the professional coolness of someone who wasn't ready to let her guard down. But she dressed with more care than usual, subtle mascara, a soft navy blouse instead of her usual scrubs. She told herself it was a coincidence. How's the pain? She asked, leading him to the treatment table. Tolerable, the shoulders tight, feels like it belongs to someone else. That's normal, the body guards itself after trauma, will remind it that it's safe. Her touch was firm, her instructions direct. Mason followed them without complaint, his brow furrowing with concentration. There was no flirtation in his voice, no forced small talk, just quiet obedience, the kind she was used to from patients who had learned the hard way that healing was not passive. Halfway through the session, while she stretched his shoulder through passive range, he let out a breath. Did you ever think we'd see each other again? I didn't let myself. Why not? Because you left without saying goodbye. I wasn't going to write the ending for you. He flinched, not physically, but in a way that made his eyes dim for a second. I was a coward, he said. I didn't know how to be the man you deserved, so I left before you realized it. You were wrong, she replied, voice low. I knew who you were, I chose you anyway. Mason didn't respond, she didn't ask for more. After the session, he sat on the edge of the table, rolling his injured ankle in small circles as instructed. She watched the way he winced with each motion but never complained. That was new. 10 years ago, he would have made a joke, distracted her with some reckless grin. Now he met discomfort with silence. He stood carefully, pulling on his coat with his good arm. Do you still paint? He asked. Lena blinked. Why would you remember that? You used to keep your sketches in a leather folder under the bed. You thought I didn't know, but I did. You were good. I don't paint much anymore, she said. Life got in the way. Would you ever start again? I don't know, some things don't come back the way they left. She didn't mean it to be a metaphor, but his expression said he heard it that way. That night she walked home through the dusky chill, her scarf wrapped tight around her neck. The city had changed since he left, or maybe she had. The streets seemed sharper, faster, but the mural on the bakery wall was still there, faded sunflowers and children with open palms. She used to stop and sketch it in her notebook on the way to nursing school. She hadn't drawn it in years. At home, she found herself staring at the empty corner where her easel once stood. The closet still held her supplies, buried under winter coats and forgotten donations. She opened the box on impulse, the scent of charcoal dust rising like a memory. She set it up that night not because of Mason. She told herself that more than once. 2 weeks passed. He kept every appointment, punctual, patient, quieter than she'd ever known him to be. They spoke sparingly, their conversations careful and contained. He asked about the clinic, about her work, never about her love life. She was grateful. But small cracks began to form. He brought coffee once, said it was from the same shop they used to haunt on Saturdays, the one that still hand-ground the beans. She didn't take it at first. You can't win me with nostalgia, she warned. It's not nostalgia, he said, it's coffee. The next session she accepted it, black, no sugar, just the way she used to take it. He noticed her sketchbook the week after that, resting on her desk near the coat rack. You started again, he said. I did. May I see? No. He smiled faintly, fair enough. That day he moved better. The swelling in his shoulder had eased, and he managed a full rotation without pain. When she reached to help guide his arm, his fingers grazed hers just briefly, but neither of them pulled away. Afterward, she stood by the door while he packed his things. He looked up at her like he wanted to say something else, something that mattered, but couldn't find the shape of it. I've been thinking, he started, about that night, the last one. Don't, she said softly, turning to leave. Lena. She froze in the doorway. I thought I was doing the right thing. I really believed you'd be better off without me." Her voice trembled as she answered, "You were wrong." He didn't chase her, just nodded once as if absorbing the weight of her words. That evening the rain came in sheets, drumming against her windows like insistence. She sat at her kitchen table, sketching long lines across blank paper, but her mind was on him. On the way he held back now, how the old recklessness had given way to restraint. She didn't know what she felt yet, only that something inside her had shifted, something cautious and sore, like skin just beginning to heal. She touched her collarbone absently, where he used to press his lips after long days, and whispered to no one in particular, "Why now, Mason?" There was no answer, just the sound of rain and memory. Winter arrived quietly that year, slipping in on the heels of November wind. The trees outside the clinic shed their leaves in a slow, rust-colored surrender, and Lena found herself walking through them each morning, coffee in hand, her breath visible in the crisp air. Her routine had always been steady, but now it carried a subtle tension, an anticipation she hadn't allowed herself to name. Mason's recovery had accelerated. Weeks of disciplined therapy had returned nearly full function to his shoulder, and Lena could see the difference in the way he moved. More fluid, less guarded, but there was something else, too, something in the way he lingered after appointments, his eyes lingering longer, his silences filled with unspoken things. She kept it professional, always, except for the occasional smile she didn't catch in time, or the way her voice softened when she asked him to be careful. She told herself it was just history echoing in the present. It was nearing the end of their scheduled sessions, when he brought something wrapped in brown paper and string. "For you," he said, setting it gently on the counter after their appointment, "before I graduate from your care." "I don't accept gifts from patients," she replied, though she didn't move to return it. "It's not a gift," he said, "it's closure or maybe a beginning, I'm not sure yet." He left before she could argue. Inside the wrapping was a sketchbook, new, thick paper, hand-bound. Inside the front cover, he'd written a single line, "Some things come back softer and better." She closed it gently, holding it against her chest. That night she painted for the first time in years, not in black and white as she often did when her mind was too loud, but in warm ochres and deep greens, colors that reminded her of places they used to go, a lake in late summer, the tiny park bench on Mercer Street, the back of his motorcycle, her arms around his waist. It wasn't longing, not exactly. It was something more complicated, something truer. The next time he came in, she didn't speak of the sketchbook. Instead, she adjusted his band and checked the strength in his wrist. When her fingers brushed his, he didn't let go right away. "I'm being discharged next week," he said. "I know. And then what?" he asked, voice low. "That depends," she said without looking up. "Are you asking as a patient or as the man who broke my heart?" Mason's jaw tightened, as the man who regrets it every single day. She stepped back, giving herself space to breathe. "What happened to you, Mason, after you left?" He exhaled. "I thought I was chasing something bigger. Racing, traveling, trying to prove I could be more than the mechanic's kid with calloused hands. I didn't realize I was losing pieces of myself in the process." "Did you think of me?" "Every time I saw something beautiful." It landed somewhere deep in her chest. She tried to ignore it, but it rooted there anyway. "I rebuilt my life," she said quietly. "I know," he said, "and I'd never want to undo that, but if there's a place for me in it now, even a small one, I'd earn it." She didn't answer, not then. Instead, she handed him a resistance band and gave him one final set of exercises, clinical, controlled, but her hands shook just slightly when they brushed his skin. That weekend, Lena's best friend, Kara, invited her out for dinner. They met at a small bistro, one of those hidden gems tucked between a bookstore and a florist. As they shared risotto and red wine, Kara leaned in. "So, Mason." Lena sighed, swirling the wine in her glass. "It's complicated." "It always was, but you still look at him like you're trying not to fall again." "I can't trust it, not yet." "Are you protecting yourself from him, or from the hope that maybe this time it's real?" Lena didn't answer, she didn't have to. Later that night, walking home beneath a sky full of city stars, she passed the community garage Mason had mentioned. Its windows were aglow with warm light, laughter echoing from inside. She saw him kneeling beside a teenager, pointing at something under the hood of an old rusted car. He looked alive in a way she hadn't seen before. She kept walking, but her steps slowed. 3 days later, Mason missed his session. No call, no message. She waited, told herself it didn't matter, that it was probably something mundane. A delay, a cold, nothing more. But when he missed the next one too, she called the garage. No answer, just a voicemail with his voice still warm, still too familiar. She didn't leave a message. By the third day, she gave in and walked to the garage. It was closed, a sign on the door read "Family Emergency." The windows were dark. Something gripped her chest then, not panic but something adjacent. She wasn't ready for that feeling, not again. She turned to go, but the door opened before she reached the curb. Lena. He stood there unshaven, eyes heavy. What happened? She asked. My dad, he said, heart failure, he passed on Monday. She stepped toward him instinctively, her hand on his arm. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't want it to be the reason you came. I came because I care. His expression broke open then, all the strength he'd been holding collapsing into grief. She hadn't seen him cry since the night he told her he loved her for the first time, half drunk and too young to know what to do with it. This time she pulled him into a hug. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't gentle, it was necessary. I'm so sorry, she whispered into his shoulder. He nodded against her hair. They stood like that for a long time, no words, just the shared silence of something too big to explain. And when she finally stepped back, her hand stayed on his chest. You don't have to go through this alone, she said. His fingers covered hers and he closed his eyes. I don't want to anymore. That night she made him soup in her apartment. He sat at her table like no time had passed, though everything had changed. He ate slowly, gratefully. And when she walked him to the door, he paused. I still love you, he said. I didn't come back expecting anything, but I won't pretend I don't. Lena's heart beat once painfully. I need time, she said. I'll wait, he replied, even if you never change your mind. She nodded. Good night, Mason. Good night, Lena. He left quietly. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone when the door closed behind him. Mason didn't come back to the clinic after that night. His therapy had officially ended, but Lena still expected him, hoped for him, in ways she wasn't proud of. She told herself it was habit, routine, the way grief filled a chair even after the person stood up and left. Instead, he gave her space. Weeks passed with no texts, no calls. She returned to her normal schedule, filled her evenings with charting, art, and the kind of quiet that had once soothed her. But now it was too quiet. She found herself sketching scenes she hadn't witnessed. Mason laughing with a child at the garage, Mason pouring oil over an engine, Mason sitting alone at his father's bedside. She didn't share them with anyone. One Saturday morning, snow dusted the sidewalks, softening the world. Lena walked to the small cafe on Irving Street, the one with mismatched chairs and faded watercolor paintings taped to the walls. She brought her sketchbook, thinking the change of scenery might untangle the thoughts in her head. She didn't expect to see his truck outside. Her heart stuttered. Inside, he sat at the back, a mug between his hands. He looked tired, worn down at the edges in a way that had nothing to do with physical pain. But when he saw her, his face lit up slowly, like sunrise finding its way through fog. She didn't turn around, she walked to him. Mason. Hey, he said, standing a little too fast. I didn't think you'd be here. Neither did I. He gestured to the other chair. Would you sit? She did. They sat in silence for a moment. Around them, the cafe hummed softly, cups clinking, someone tuning a guitar in the corner, the steam hiss of espresso. How have you been? He asked. Busy, the clinic's full, I started painting again. His smile tugged at something old in her. I always hoped you would. She watched him closely. The weight in his eyes was familiar now, grief still fresh, but quieter, more settled into his skin. How are you? She asked. I'm figuring it out, he said. My dad left the house to me. It's small, but it has a porch. I've been spending nights out there just listening. To what? Regret, memories, the wind, all of it. He looked away, the muscles in his jaw tightening. He wasn't a perfect man, but he tried, and in the end that counted for something. Lena nodded slowly, trying counts. He looked back at her. Do I still have a place in your life? She didn't answer right away. There was a time, she said carefully, when I would have given anything to hear you say that, but now, I need to know who we are outside of what we used to be. I'm not here to rush you, he said. I'm just here for as long as it takes. She studied him for a long time, not the man she remembered, but the one sitting in front of her. And maybe that was the point. He wasn't who he used to be, and neither was she. Then let's start with coffee, she said. He smiled, slow and true. I can do coffee. They spent the next hour talking, not about their past but about small things, his favorite books now, the kid at the garage who kept bringing him broken radios, the tomato soup she'd nearly set fire to last week. She laughed more than she expected to. He leaned in when she spoke, not to flirt but to listen. That part had always been real between them. When she stood to leave, he hesitated. Lena, would you come by sometime? The house, it's not far. I don't think I'm ready for that yet, she said honestly. He nodded, swallowing the disappointment without protest. I understand. But I'd like to see the garage. The surprise in his expression was brief, then replaced by something brighter. Yeah, I'd really like that. The next Thursday she stopped by after her shift. The garage was full of the scent of grease and metal, the floor cluttered with tools and half-assembled machines. A teenage boy waved to Mason on his way out, helmet tucked under one arm. This place is chaotic, she said. It's a mess, he agreed, but it's mine. She walked slowly past the shelves, noting the photos taped to the wall. Kids holding up wrenches, cars before and after restoration. Mason's dad standing beside a rusted truck with a cigarette tucked behind his ear. And then she saw it on the workbench, her sketchbook. What's that doing here? She asked, heart jumping. Mason looked sheepish. You left it in the clinic once. I kept meaning to return it, then I started flipping through it. She opened the cover and saw her own handwriting in the corner, but tucked inside was a loose sheet of paper, a note. It was his. You were always the one who saw more than what was there. You made me want to be someone worth painting. She looked up at him, her breath caught in her throat. I didn't mean to pry, he said. I missed the way you saw the world. I missed you. She closed the sketchbook slowly. I'm scared, she admitted. I am too. What if we try again and fall apart all over? Then we'll do it with open eyes this time. No disappearing, no silence, just truth. The words didn't fix everything, but they settled something deep inside her. She looked at the cluttered garage, the stains on his jeans, the silver thread in his hair that hadn't been there 10 years ago, and then she looked at the way he looked at her, like she was still art, still home. Okay, she said. Okay, he asked like he didn't dare believe it. We start slow, friends. Friends, he echoed, though the smile that curved his lips said he was already imagining more. They walked out into the snowy night together, not holding hands, not yet, but close, and Lena realized she wasn't afraid of the ending anymore. Because maybe this wasn't an ending at all. Maybe, finally, it was a beginning. Spring came late that year, like it had to think hard about whether to return. But when it did, it came in quietly, pale green buds on the trees outside Lena's apartment, crocuses pushing up through the thawing earth. There was a softness to the light again, and with it, a softness returning to Lena's days. It had been 3 months since she and Mason decided to start over. 3 months of cautious connection, of walks through the park with coffee in hand, of long conversations beneath porch light, of painting again, not to escape but to remember. They didn't rush it. Lena had insisted on that from the beginning. Mason had honored it like a vow. He came to her life gently this time, left her space when she needed it, laughed at the things she didn't realize were funny, helped her hang shelves in her apartment and fix the creaky hinge on her bathroom door. She let him. That part surprised her most. Their rhythm was different now, older, steadier. There were still sharp edges between them, old ghosts that surfaced when she was tired or when he hesitated before answering a hard question. But they talked through them. That was the difference. There were no exits left in his voice. One Sunday in late April, he invited her to the house. It's just dinner, he said over the phone. You already know how terrible my cooking is. Do I? She teased. We never really made it to the cooking stage back then. Right, you always brought takeout and I made excuses. You were allergic to domesticity. I'm learning, he said. I even own a cast iron skillet now. She laughed. Okay, dinner. When she arrived, the porch light was on. The steps had been repainted and a small planter sat by the door, wild lavender. She smiled when she saw it. Inside, the house smelled like roasted garlic and something sweet. The walls were still bare in places, but framed photos had started to appear. One was of Mason's dad, older, quieter, smiling behind a fishing pole. Another was of the garage kids, arms raised in victory over a fully rebuilt engine. And there, tucked on a shelf, was one of her sketches, the lake in late summer. He saw her looking. I wasn't sure if it was too much. It's not, she said softly. They ate at the small kitchen table, knees bumping occasionally. He burned the bread slightly and they laughed about it. He told her about a girl at the garage who wanted to study engineering, how he was helping her apply to programs. Lena told him about a patient who'd walked without crutches for the first time in weeks. After dinner, they moved to the porch. The air was cool but not cold. A record played softly inside, the same artist they used to listen to in his truck during long summer drives. "Remember when we used to talk about living near a lake someday?" he asked. She nodded. "We said we'd build a house with a porch that faced the water." "You painted it once." "It's still in my old portfolio," she said, "a cabin with blue shutters and a canoe." He looked at her then, not with longing, but with quiet recognition. "I think about that sometimes, not the cabin necessarily, just that feeling being known." She leaned her head against the post beside her. "Do you still feel like you don't deserve that?" "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I'm learning to believe it's okay to be loved even when you're still working on yourself." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I spent years learning how to be whole again. You don't get to be the reason I fall apart." "I won't be," he said, "I promise." She turned to him slowly. "I believe you." The words weren't loud, they didn't need to be. He reached for her hand, just her hand, and she let him hold it. Later, when she stood to leave, he walked her to her car. The sky was scattered with stars, the air laced with the scent of spring beginning. "I don't want to rush you," he said as she opened the door, "but I also don't want to pretend I don't want more." She looked up at him. "I know." He hesitated. "Then can I kiss you goodnight?" She didn't answer right away. She studied his face, the worry in his brow, the restraint in his stance. And then slowly she stepped forward. "Yes." The kiss was brief, soft, the kind of kiss that remembers everything but demands nothing. When they parted, neither spoke. There was no need. She drove home with the windows half down, the night air curling through her hair. Her chest felt wide open, like it hadn't in years. Mason didn't text her that night. He didn't need to. And in the morning, there was a bag of pastries on her doorstep with a note tucked under the twine. "For the girl who taught me that healing isn't just about bones and muscles. It's about choosing love even after." Weeks passed and things grew not quickly but deeply. He started showing up on clinic lunch breaks just to walk her down the block. She brought her art to the garage and painted the first mural she'd done in years, hands covered in grease, raised in triumph. They didn't talk much about the past anymore. They didn't have to. One evening, lying beside him on the porch swing, her head on his shoulder, she whispered, "I'm glad you came back." He kissed the top of her head. "I'm glad you let me." It wasn't the life they'd imagined when they were young. It was quieter, slower, but it was real and it was theirs. He had asked for the best physical therapist in the city. And by some twist of fate, he'd gotten the girl he once left behind. But this time he stayed.